Dalton Keene never planned to stay long in that smoky saloon. He had come to win just enough to buy a few head of breeding cattle, nothing more. The drought had crushed his herd, and his ranch, what little was left of it, was barely surviving. But that night, something happened that would change everything, starting with the girl whose eyes didn't blink when the stakes changed from money to people. The cards hit the table slow and deliberate. Aces over kings. A winning hand by anyone's measure. The men around him groaned or cursed under their breath, but one of them didn't flinch. Joaquin Herrera, thin and shaking, just leaned back and pulled out a folded piece of paper instead of cash. "I got nothing left but this," he said, barely louder than the fire crackling near the wall. Dalton expected a deed for land or maybe some scrap of livestock. What he saw was worse. A name, an age, 17, and a signature scrawled at the bottom. His heart sank. "What the hell is this?" he asked. "My niece," Joaquin said. "She's strong. Works hard. She'll cook, clean, help on the ranch. Worth more than cattle." Dalton stared at the paper like it might bite him. The saloon was quiet now. Even Murphy behind the bar had stopped polishing glasses. All eyes on him. Dalton pushed the deed back across the table. "I don't want no girl," he said flatly. "Keep your family." But Joaquin's hands started shaking harder. "Please, senor, I owe money to bad men. They come tomorrow. If I can't pay—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The saloon doors creaked behind them, and a young woman stepped in like she'd been watching from outside, waiting for her cue. Dust on her boots, dark braid tight against her back, eyes sharp as cut stone. She walked up without hesitation. "Uncle," she said in careful English, "you don't have to do this." Joaquin's face cracked under the weight of it. "Mija, there's no other way." Dalton looked at her then, not desperate, not begging, just watching, measuring, like she wanted to know what kind of man he was before she said another word. He'd seen that same look in Mustangs deciding whether to bolt or stand their ground. "What exactly are you asking me to do with her?" Dalton asked. Joaquin leaned in, voice low. "Let her work. She'll earn her keep. Just keep her safe." Dalton felt heat creep up the back of his neck. He wasn't looking for this. He lived alone for a reason. The ranch was barely holding together. He didn't have time to babysit a teenager. "I run cattle, not a boarding house," he said. "Then marry her," Joaquin said quickly. "She's of age. She don't need nothing but a roof and someone to keep her safe. I don't care how. Just don't let them take her." Esperanza, if that was her name, stepped forward. "Senor, I know this is not what you wanted, but the men coming tomorrow, they're not patient. My uncle is right about that." She paused, eyes steady. "I won't cry or beg, but I need protection. You need help on your land. Maybe this helps both of us." Dalton studied her again. She was calm, collected, too much so for her age. "These men your uncle owes, what kind of debt we talking about?" $300, Joaquin whispered. Dalton almost laughed. "That's 2 years' wages for most men." Joaquin nodded slowly. "I borrowed to help families cross the border. They didn't make it, but the debt remained. So it wasn't just gambling. It was kindness gone wrong. And now this girl was the price." "You got any family?" Dalton asked her. "No, just my uncle." He looked down at his cards again. Still a winning hand. Still the best shot he'd had in years. But the longer he looked at her, the less he could pretend this was just a game. "You understand what he's offering?" Dalton said. "He's handing you to a stranger." She nodded. "And I'm asking if you're the kind of man who would accept that, with honor." That stopped him. The way she said it, like it was his character on the line, not hers. Murphy leaned in. "You playin' or foldin', Keene?" Dalton didn't answer. Not yet. Dalton didn't move right away. He looked around the table again. 5 men, all quiet now. Watching. Waiting. Some of them looked uncomfortable, like they wanted to pretend they hadn't heard what was said. Others just looked curious, like this was the most excitement they'd had in months. Dalton leaned back in his chair and rubbed his jaw. $300, he repeated. "That's not small money." "No," Joaquin said. "But she's not a small thing. She's my family." Dalton let out a long breath. The fire popped behind them. Somewhere in the saloon, a chair creaked. Esperanza hadn't moved. She stood with her hands folded in front of her, calm and still. She didn't look scared. She looked ready. "Why me?" Dalton asked. "You don't know a thing about me. I know enough, Esperanza said. You could have laughed and walked away, but you didn't. He looked down at his worn leather wallet. Inside was the money he'd been saving for new cattle. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. He thought about his ranch, half-dead land, a crooked barn, fences barely standing, and the silence. So much silence out there, even the wind felt lonely. He pulled out the bills and counted 300 slowly. When he placed them on the table, Joaquin stared like he couldn't believe it. His hands were shaking. Senor, I don't know how to thank you. You don't, Dalton said. I'm not buying your niece. I'm paying your debt. She works for me. I give food and a place to sleep. And when she wants to go, she's free. Esperanza didn't smile, but her eyes softened. She reached for the paper her uncle had tried to give away and tore it in two. I understand, senor, and I accept. Murphy let out a loud breath and started gathering cards. Strangest hand I ever saw, he muttered. You just paid 300 for a hired hand you could have passed on. Maybe, Dalton said, standing up, but at least I'll sleep tonight. They walked outside into the cool night air. The stars were sharp above them. Esperanza walked beside him, her small bag tied to her uncle's horse. Joaquin was already mounting up, eager to leave town before morning came. He got down once more and hugged his niece tight. Mija, you are stronger than I ever was. Make a life here. A good one. I will, she said. You stay safe. Dalton watched them, feeling something strange twist inside him. This was all the family they had, and now they were saying goodbye like it might be forever. It made him think of his own family, long gone, buried under a hill with simple stones and no visitors. Joaquin didn't look back as he rode away into the darkness. Esperanza stood in the empty street for a moment, her eyes following the fading shape of her uncle. Then she turned to Dalton. Her voice was quiet. So what happens now? Dalton didn't know. He hadn't thought that far. He had just taken responsibility for someone else's life, and he wasn't even sure he was doing a good job handling his own. He nodded toward his horse. We ride. It's a couple hours back to my place. The ride was quiet. Esperanza sat behind him, not saying much, but Dalton could feel her thinking, watching. She sat straight, like she had something to prove. When they reached his ranch, the sky was just starting to lighten. The house looked worse at night. The barn leaned. The fence had holes. Weeds covered the yard. He felt embarrassed. It's not much, he said as they dismounted. She looked at it for a long time. It has good bones. Sometimes that's enough. Inside, he lit a lamp. The house looked just as bad. Dusty, dishes in the sink, clothes on chairs. It looked like a man had been living alone without trying. Esperanza took it all in without saying a word. Then she said, I'll sleep in the barn. Tomorrow I'll start cleaning. No, Dalton said. You'll sleep in the spare room. It's not fancy, but it's got a rail bed. He showed her to the small room at the end of the hall. It had been meant for children once. That dream died years ago. The bed was narrow but clean. She placed her bag on the floor and turned. Senor Dalton, I want to be clear. I'm grateful, but I owe you only honest work. Nothing more. He met her eyes. I wouldn't expect anything else. I've seen what happens to girls when men think they're owed something else. I'd rather take my chances with danger than live that way. I'm not that kind of man, he said. I believe you, she replied, but I needed to say it clearly, so there's no confusion later. He nodded. There's well water outside. I usually eat at sunrise. I'll make breakfast, she said. What do you eat? Whatever's around. Beans. Bread, if I remember. She wrinkled her nose. That's not a diet for a working man. I'll make something better. Dalton left her in the room and sat on his porch. The sky was getting light. He had come to town to win money. Instead, he came home with a girl who talked like a grown woman and made deals like one too. But for the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. Dalton woke before the sun was fully up, same as always. But something was different. The house smelled like bread, warm, real bread, something he hadn't smelled in years. He got up quickly and followed the scent into the kitchen. Esperanza was already there. She had flour on her hands and was turning eggs in a pan. A loaf of bread sat cooling on the table beside her. She didn't turn when he entered. Buenos dias, she said softly. I found flour and some eggs. The bread will be ready soon. Dalton poured himself coffee. Even the coffee smelled better than usual. You didn't have to wake up this early, he said. I always wake early, she said. It's the best time to think. He watched her for a moment. She moved like she knew what she was doing. Calm, steady, sure. She looked completely refreshed, like she hadn't spent the night in a stranger's house after leaving the only family she had behind. I was thinking about your ranch, she said suddenly, nodding toward the window. You have good land, good water, but you're not using it well. He raised an eyebrow. I raise cattle. My father did too. It's what I know. Cattle need too much grass, too much water, she said. In a drought, they die. You need more than one plan. She placed a plate in front of him, eggs, fresh bread, and a bit of sliced tomato. It looked simple, but it smelled better than anything he'd had in months. You raise goats, right? He asked, taking a bite. It tasted amazing. Yes. Goats eat weeds, give milk. Chickens give eggs even when it's dry. A garden gives food when money runs low. Dalton nodded slowly. You learned all this from your family? She paused just a second too long. See, among other things, there was again that feeling, like she was holding something back. But before he could ask, she pointed toward the window again. Your fences are bad, but the posts are strong. Your barn is crooked, but the base is fine. You've been keeping things from falling apart, but you haven't tried to make them better. He looked down at his plate. She wasn't wrong. I guess you've got a plan to fix all that? I have ideas. But first I want to know why you gave up. He stopped chewing. I haven't given up, he said. Haven't you? She asked. You have good land, enough money to pay my uncle's debt. You work hard, but you live like someone waiting for the end. He put his fork down. The food was good, but his stomach wasn't ready anymore. My wife and I had plans, he said. Big ones. We were going to build something worth passing on. What happened? He didn't answer right away. She died. And before that, we tried for years to have children. It never happened. He didn't look at her, just stared at the table. Without a family, there's no point. Who's going to take over the ranch when I'm gone? Esperanza was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Can I tell you something about my parents? Dalton nodded. They never owned land. They worked for others their whole lives. But they taught me that building something beautiful is still worth doing, even if it doesn't last. Beauty is proof that good things are possible, even if they don't stay forever. Her words hit harder than he expected. Dalton looked around the kitchen. Dust in the corners. Old curtains. A table that hadn't seen a full meal in years. He had lived in it, yes, but he hadn't lived with it. After breakfast, he took Esperanza outside. Come on, he said. You should see the rest. They walked the land together. She asked questions he hadn't expected. About water, soil, seasons. She understood more than most grown men he'd worked with. And she wasn't just asking, she was planning. Seeing things he hadn't. She stopped at a flat spot near the house. This would be a good place for vegetables, she said. Morning sun, no wind. You really think we can change this place? He asked. I think we can, she said. If you're willing to try. The word we caught him off guard. No one had said that to him in years. Why do you care? He asked. You could find work in town. Start your own life. Why waste time on my broken dreams? She stopped walking, turned toward him. Because I know what it means to lose everything. And I know what it means to start over. Dalton watched her carefully. Something deep moved behind her eyes. She took a deep breath. My parents didn't just die, she said. They were killed. He froze. Killed. She nodded. We had a small farm. Some powerful ranchers wanted our water. My father refused to sell. Then came the fire. They made it look like an accident. But it wasn't. Dalton stared at her. I was at my aunt's when it happened. When I came home, there was nothing left. He swallowed. Did anyone help? My uncle tried. He fought. But we had no money, no lawyers. The men were rich, respected. We were just poor farmers. That explained everything. The fear, the strength, the way she measured people. So you're not just here for safety, Dalton said. You're here to build something no one can take. Yes, she said softly. And because I see something in you. You didn't give up because you're weak. You gave up because you were afraid of losing again. Dalton looked at the land around them. Dry, empty, but maybe not dead. Maybe I do have reason to be afraid. Maybe, she said, but fear is no reason to waste a life. They stood there a while, not saying anything, just looking at the land. The early sun warmed the ground beneath their feet, and for the first time in years, Dalton saw his ranch as something that could live again. Maybe not big, maybe not perfect, but alive. He looked at her. If we do this, if we fix the ranch, make it work again, what happens when you're ready to leave? When you find someone to marry or want your own land? Esperanza smiled. A small, real smile that changed her whole face. Then you'll know you can build something that matters. And maybe you'll keep building even after I'm gone. Dalton didn't say anything, but her words stayed with him as they walked back to the house. He had agreed to take her in for work, but now he was thinking about purpose, about beginnings instead of endings. Still, there was something in her that hadn't come out yet, something more than grief, a piece of the story she was still hiding. The days passed quickly after that. 3 weeks later, the ranch didn't look the same. Fences were fixed. The barn stood straight. Chickens scratched around the yard, and a small garden had taken root near the back. Esperanza had turned the quiet, broken land into something breathing again. She worked like someone who didn't know how to stop. Dalton did his best to keep up, and it wasn't just the land that changed. The house had laughter again, small talk over meals, arguments about where to plant beans. It wasn't much, but it was more than Dalton had expected from this strange, sudden partnership. One afternoon, while fixing part of the corral, Dalton saw a rider coming down the road. The man wore a badge and carried a serious look on his face. Dalton knew him, Sheriff Tom Bradley. A good man. Fair. Honest. But he didn't show up without a reason. Afternoon, Dalton, Tom said, climbing off his horse. Dalton nodded. Sheriff, something wrong. Bradley looked at Esperanza, who was just finishing tying off a section of fence. She glanced up but didn't move closer. I need to talk to you both, Tom said, voice low. Some men have been asking around town, looking for a young Mexican girl traveling with her uncle. Dalton felt Esperanza stop breathing beside him. She didn't speak, just stared at the ground. What kind of men? Dalton asked. The kind who don't ask twice. Clean suits, big guns. Said they were collecting a debt, but he looked uncomfortable. They're not just collectors. Dalton frowned. Then what are they? Tom took a deep breath. They're carrying federal warrants. For murder. Dalton looked at Esperanza. She was pale now. Her hands clenched at her sides, but she didn't look surprised. Bradley continued. There was a fire down in Texas a few years ago. A family died. Mexican farmers. The case went cold. But now they've got enough evidence to charge the men responsible. And they think the girl, your girl, might be a witness. Dalton stared at her. It was all clicking into place now. Her quiet strength. The way she looked at people like she was reading their soul. She had seen something. She had survived something. They want her to testify, he asked. Bradley nodded. They think she might run if she knows, so they're trying to find her quiet. But those men, the ones who killed her parents, they're looking too. Dalton turned to Esperanza. Is this true? She didn't flinch. Yes, I saw them. I saw what they did. And they know I'm the only one left who can tell the truth. Bradley shifted his weight. If she testifies and they're found guilty, she'll be safe. But if something goes wrong, he didn't need to finish. Dalton looked at her, really looked. She wasn't just a smart girl with farming skills. She had been carrying this weight every single day, living in fear, planning everything with care because her life depended on it. He lowered his voice. It's your choice. Whatever you want to do, I'll stand by you. Esperanza closed her eyes for a long moment, then opened them slowly. I've been running for 3 years, but my parents deserve justice, and other families deserve to be safe. She turned to Tom. Tell the marshals they can find me here. I'll testify. Tom nodded, but his face was serious. Then we need to be ready. Those men aren't going to let this go easy. As the sheriff rode away, Dalton stood in silence. The sun was low now, and long shadows crossed the field. He knew the quiet they had built together was about to be broken. Danger was coming, and it was coming straight for them. The sun dipped low as Dalton and Esperanza finished up at the corral. The sheriff's warning hung heavy in the air. Neither of them spoke for a while. The quiet wasn't peaceful now. It was sharp, like waiting for a storm. Dalton put away the tools slowly, his mind racing. He'd taken her in thinking he was helping a girl with no home. But now he knew the truth. She wasn't just in danger. She was the key to justice. The men who killed her family would do anything to stop her from speaking. Back in the house, Esperanza was quiet too. She stood by the window, watching the road. Dalton brought her a cup of coffee, but she didn't take her eyes off the horizon. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Saying yes to the sheriff?" She shook her head. "No, I've been carrying the truth too long. I want to lay it down now. I want to stop looking over my shoulder." He nodded slowly. "I just worry they might come before the marshals do." "I know," she said softly. Dalton poured himself a cup and sat across from her. "If it comes to a fight, I'll protect you. You have my word." She finally turned to face him. "I believe you." That night, Dalton couldn't sleep. He kept getting up, checking the windows, walking the porch with a shotgun in hand. The stars above were bright, but the night felt tense. Too quiet, like the land was holding its breath. By morning, both of them looked tired. Still, Esperanza cooked breakfast. Same as always. Eggs, bread, and a bit of stew from last night's meal. Dalton ate in silence, thinking about what might come next. "I've been thinking," she said between bites. "If those men come, they'll want to get to me before I reach court. That means we can't wait for trouble. We need to prepare." Dalton looked at her. "What kind of preparing?" "We need to fix the gate at the back of the property, and the north fence. That's the weak side. If they come, they'll use the easy way." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "We'll do it today." They spent the day walking the edges of the land. Esperanza pointed out places he had stopped noticing. Broken wire, spots where the brush had thinned. She worked like someone who wasn't afraid, but Dalton knew she was. He could see it in the way she kept looking over her shoulder, in the way she didn't sing like she usually did when planting. That night, they brought supplies into the house. Dalton double-checked the locks. He loaded his rifle and laid it by the door. Esperanza tucked a kitchen knife into her boot. "I've lived through worse," she said quietly, "but I don't want to go through it again." "You won't," he said. "Not while you're under my roof." But deep down, Dalton knew this wasn't just about his roof. This was bigger. This was justice. And justice always came with a price. Later, they sat on the porch in silence, just like they had done the first night she came home with him. But this time, the silence wasn't about sadness. It was about readiness. "I used to wonder if I'd ever stop running," she said. "Maybe this is what it looks like, standing still even when you're scared." Dalton didn't know what to say, but he reached over and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "We'll face it together," he said. Esperanza turned to look at him. "Thank you for not turning away that night, for seeing me as a person." He swallowed hard. "You weren't hard to see. You stood there like someone who knew her worth." She smiled again, tired but true. Inside the house, the lamp flickered low. Dalton checked the front windows once more before heading to his room. He left the door open, just in case. Around midnight, a strange sound woke him. Horses. He grabbed the rifle and moved to the front window. Shadows moved beyond the fence line. 3 men. Maybe 4. Slow. Careful. He went to Esperanza's room. She was already up, knife in hand, fully dressed. She didn't look surprised. Just ready. "They're here," he whispered. She nodded. "Then let's finish this." They moved together to the back door, silent as breath. Dalton's hands were steady on the gun. Esperanza stayed behind him, watching the side windows. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, knocking. A calm voice. Too calm. "Mr. Keene, we just want to talk. You've got something that belongs to us." Dalton didn't answer. "You hand her over, and we walk away. No one gets hurt." Dalton raised the rifle. "You come any closer, I shoot." The voice changed. "Sharper now. Don't be a fool. You think she's worth dying for." Dalton's voice didn't shake. "She's worth more than all of you put together." And that's when they opened fire. The first shot shattered a window. Dalton pulled Esperanza down behind the kitchen table as glass flew across the room. He fired back through the open front door. His bullet hit the porch post with a loud crack, but the attackers scattered, taking cover. "Stay low," he said. "I am," she replied, calm but alert. Another shot hit the side of the house. Dalton moved fast, dragging a cabinet in front of the window as cover. "They're trying to push us out. They'll burn the house next," Esperanza said. "Like they did to mine." Her words hit him hard, but there was no time to respond. He peeked out again, Two men behind the barn, one circling toward the left fence. They were trained, not random thugs. These were men who had done this before. Dalton fired again, forcing one back into cover. Then he turned to Esperanza. "You know the root cellar?" She nodded. "Behind the house, under the old chicken coop. Go now. Take the back door. Stay down. I'll draw them away." "No," she said firmly. "We stay together." He looked at her, really looked. She wasn't a child. She was someone who had already lived through worse. But that didn't mean he wanted her in the middle of a gunfight. "Listen to me," he said. "If I fall, you run. Understand?" She nodded slowly, eyes locked on his. "And if I fall, you keep going." A gunshot rang out, closer this time. Dalton ducked. "Time to move." They crawled through the hallway and out the back. Esperanza led the way, cutting behind the coop where brush had grown thick. Dalton covered her with his rifle, every muscle in his body tense. They made it to the root cellar. Dalton opened the hatch. It smelled of earth and old potatoes, but it was dry and hidden. "You stay," he said. "I'll bring them away from the house." Esperanza grabbed his arm. "Be careful." He nodded once and took off running along the edge of the field, making noise on purpose. Gunfire followed him, but none hit. He reached the barn and slipped inside. From a small window, he watched one of the men searching near the house. Another moved toward the back door. Dalton aimed and fired. The man dropped. He didn't move again. The others shouted and scattered. Back in the cellar, Esperanza waited. She could hear everything. Shots. Boots. Someone yelling. She clutched her knife tighter, ready to fight if anyone found her. But then came silence. Too long. She pushed open the hatch and peeked out. Smoke. Not from the house, from the barn. They were trying to burn him out. She ran. Dalton was in the barn, hiding behind hay bales when the smoke started. His eyes watered. He tried the side door. It was jammed. Fire climbed the walls fast. He coughed, struggling to breathe. Then crash. The back wall gave way. A figure appeared through the smoke. Esperanza, axe in hand, hacking through the boards. "Come on," she shouted. He stumbled through the hole just before the flames reached the roof. They ran toward the trees behind the pasture, fire lighting up the sky behind them. They didn't stop until they were far enough to catch their breath. Dalton bent over, coughing hard. "You should have stayed hidden." "I told you," she said steady. "We stay together." From the trees, they could see the ranch house. The attackers were regrouping. One had a torch. They were going to finish what they started. But before the man could strike a match, a voice echoed across the land. "Federal marshals, drop your weapons." Bright lanterns appeared behind the trees near the road. Horses, riders, badges. The men dropped their guns fast. Some tried to run, but were caught. One shouted in panic. Dalton recognized his voice. He was the one who had spoken through the door. Dalton and Esperanza stepped out of the trees. A marshal spotted them and waved them over. "You two all right?" Dalton nodded. "They tried to kill us." "We know," the man said. "We've been tracking them for weeks. Sheriff said you might be in danger. We rode all night." Esperanza looked back at the house. The barn was still burning. The kitchen window was gone, but they were alive. "Are they the ones who killed my parents?" she asked. The marshal looked at the group of tied-up men. "Two of them, yes. You need to testify, but your statement can help put them away for good." She nodded slowly. Dalton stepped closer. "She's not going alone. I'll be there. Every step." The marshal tipped his hat. "Glad to hear it." They watched as the marshals led the men away. The sky was starting to turn pink with morning light. Esperanza leaned on Dalton's shoulder. She was shaking now, the adrenaline wearing off. He wrapped an arm around her. "It's over," he whispered. "You did it." "No," she said quietly. "We did." And for the first time in years, Dalton felt like he had a purpose again. The next few days passed in a blur. The marshals stayed one night before taking the prisoners south. Esperanza gave them her statement, clear and steady. She told them everything she remembered. Every word, every face, every scream from that night the fire took her family. Dalton stood beside her the whole time. He didn't speak unless asked. He just made sure she knew she wasn't alone. After they left, the ranch was quiet again. But it wasn't peaceful. The barn was nothing but a pile of charred wood and ashes. The kitchen window had been boarded up, and bullet holes still marked the front door. Even with the danger gone, it all felt heavy. Esperanza didn't rest much. She swept ashes, picked up broken glass, mended a fence post like it was just another chore. But Dalton saw the tiredness in her shoulders, the way she moved slower than before. One afternoon, she stood in front of the burn barn, holding a hammer, just staring. "We'll rebuild it," Dalton said, coming up beside her. She didn't look at him. "It won't be the same." "No," he said quietly. "But maybe that's okay." She finally turned toward him. "You think we're safe now?" Dalton thought for a second. "Safe? Maybe. Forever safe? Probably not. But for now, yeah." She nodded, then looked up at the sky. It was blue and wide and calm. "I forgot what it felt like not to be afraid every minute." Dalton leaned against the fence. "You've been carrying too much for too long." "So have you," she said. They stood there in silence for a while, side by side. No rush, no plan. Just breathing. That night, as they ate stew and fresh bread by lantern light, Esperanza finally asked, "Do you ever think about leaving this place?" Dalton looked around the room. The walls were still marked by smoke. The air still held a bit of ash. But somehow, it felt more like home than it had in years. "Used to think about it all the time," he said. "But now not so much." "Why not?" "Because someone walked into my life and reminded me that it's not the land that's broken. It's just been waiting for someone to care about it again." She smiled, tired but warm. "I feel the same way." The next morning, Dalton found Esperanza sitting on the porch with a notebook. She was writing something in Spanish, the pages filling up fast. "What's that?" he asked. "My memory," she said. "Everything. My family. The fire. This place. You. I want to keep it safe before I forget the small things." He nodded. "That's smart. I never told you something," she said. "After my parents died, I had a dream. I was standing in the ashes, alone. And someone came, someone I didn't know. He didn't speak, just stood with me." Dalton listened closely. "I never saw his face clearly, but I felt safe. For a long time, I thought it was just a dream. But the night I met you, when you put your hand on that deed and told my uncle you weren't buying me, it felt familiar." Dalton didn't know what to say. His throat tightened. "You don't owe me anything, Senor Dalton," she said. "I know I came into your life suddenly. But if you ever wonder why, maybe it's because we were both standing in ashes. And maybe we were supposed to help each other stand back up." He blinked away the sting in his eyes. "Maybe we were." They kept working through the days, rebuilding the barn slowly, replanting the parts of the garden that had been trampled. Dalton had started drawing up plans for a new chicken coop, and even cleared out the old shed that had been falling apart for years. Every night, they ate together, talked about small things. Some nights they didn't talk at all, just sat and listened to the wind. One evening, as the sun was setting, Esperanza walked to the old field that had been untouched since Martha died. Dalton followed her. "We should plant something here," she said. "It's hard soil," he warned. "Dry, hard to break." She looked at the field, then back at him. "So were we." He smiled. "All right, let's give it a try." They worked until it got dark, turning the dry ground, one row at a time. It was hard, slow, but something about it felt right. That night, as Dalton sat on the porch alone, looking out at the stars, he heard soft footsteps behind him. Esperanza sat beside him. She didn't say anything at first. Then she looked up and asked, "Dalton, do you think people like us can be a family?" He looked at her, quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I think family isn't always what you're born with. Sometimes it's who stands beside you when everything's falling apart." She leaned her head gently against his shoulder. "I hope I can stay," she whispered. "You can," he said, "as long as you want." Spring came earlier than usual that year. The sky stayed open and clear. Rain fell when it needed to, and the earth softened enough for planting. For the first time in a long while, Dalton's land felt alive again, not just because of the weather, but because of the people working it. He and Esperanza planted rows of vegetables in the old field. Tomatoes, peppers, squash. They added more chickens and even bought 2 young goats from a neighbor. Each morning started with chores and fresh coffee. Each evening ended with the sound of laughter or quiet conversation. The house looked different too, brighter, lived in. The bullet holes were patched. the broken glass replaced. The porch had new paint, and flowers grew along the steps where weeds used to be. But it wasn't just the ranch that had changed. Dalton had changed. He smiled more. He worked with purpose. He even started writing letters to his sister in Idaho, something he hadn't done since Martha died. Esperanza had encouraged him, said it was good to talk to the people who still mattered. Esperanza changed too. She no longer looked over her shoulder. She no longer flinched at strange sounds in the night. Her voice was louder, freer. She sang while planting and joked with Dalton during meals. She was 17, but she carried the heart of someone much older, someone who had walked through fire and survived. One warm afternoon, they sat on the hill overlooking the field. The goats were grazing, the chickens pecking near the fence. Esperanza pulled something from her bag. It was the notebook, the one where she wrote everything. "I want to read you something," she said, flipping to the last page. Dalton leaned back in the grass and listened. "I used to think life was about surviving," she read softly. "But surviving is just the beginning. Living comes after. Living is when you grow something, love something, build something, even when you know it might not last." She paused, then looked up at him. "You taught me that." Dalton felt a lump rise in his throat. "You taught me the same thing." A silence passed between them, warm, full of understanding. Then she said something he didn't expect. "I got a letter from the federal court. The trial is finished. The men who killed my parents, they were found guilty. Life in prison." Dalton sat up straighter. "You did it." "No," she said with a soft smile. "We did." She looked out across the field. "I think my parents would be proud. I know they would." They stayed on that hill until the sun touched the horizon. The light bathed the land in gold, and everything looked soft and full of promise. As they walked back to the house, Esperanza stopped at the edge of the porch. "I've been thinking about college," she said. "Someday, maybe agricultural science. I want to help small farmers, people like my parents." Dalton nodded, his chest tight with pride. "You'd be great at that." She smiled. "But not yet. Right now, this is where I belong." He looked at her, standing in front of the house he had once called empty, and saw someone who had become much more than a worker. She was family. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. And sometimes that was stronger. That night, over dinner, Esperanza said something that stayed with him long after. "You know, Senior Dalton, everyone thinks strength is about holding on. But sometimes it's about letting go of pain, of fear of the past." He looked at her for a long time before answering. "And sometimes strength is just choosing to begin again, even when you're not sure how it ends." They both smiled. The lamp flickered softly in the corner. Outside, the wind moved gently through the grass like it too was starting over. Lesson of the story: real strength isn't in surviving alone. It's in allowing someone in, healing together, and choosing to build something meaningful even when the future is uncertain. Family isn't always what we're born with. Sometimes it's who shows up when we need them most and stays.